Hello everyone and welcome to Bevan's Builds, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the 10 things you might not know about an outlet. Starting with number 1, this is not an outlet. This is a receptacle, and you can actually get receptacles in a single, a duplex, or a triplex. The reason I believe they're commonly referred to as outlets is because really by definition in layman's terms, an outlet is something that you can get power from to power a device. So the next time you go to the store looking for a receptacle, or in this case, a duplex receptacle, make sure you ask for the right item. Number 2, on the back of every single receptacle, you will find a strip gauge. That strip gauge is to give you the proper amount of insulation you are to strip off the wire to use the backside wiring methods. There's actually 2 different backside wiring methods, but we're going to get to that in just a little bit. The reason they have that strip gauge on the back of the receptacle is quite simply because most people typically don't strip enough insulation off, and it doesn't provide a good connection when you're doing your wiring. Number 3, we're going to start talking about wiring methods. There are 3 different ways that you can wire a receptacle. On the back of every single receptacle, there is always a method that's called the speed wiring method. And what that is a one-time use wiring method. And that is typically how you're going to find most production working electricians, which is what I basically call house wirers. That's typically how they wire the house, and it's because they want to get in and out of the house as quickly as possible, because the less time they spend wiring the house, the more money they're going to make. Just to show you what the speed wiring method is, and it is typically not accepted, is you quite simply take the wire, you strip it down, and you stab it into the back of the receptacle. Now, the reason I say that that is a one-time use is because to remove that wire, you have to take a screwdriver and insert it into the hole next to it to push the tab on the inside of the receptacle down to release the wire. After you've done that, it typically bends the tab that's on the inside of the receptacle, and it doesn't allow for a good connection if you were to try and reuse it. Me personally, I prefer the back method. When I say the back method, you have to buy a higher quality receptacle. And then typically with those receptacles, they have the back method. The back method is you slide it into this hole, and then you just simply tighten down the screw. And that is, to me anyway, the best way to wire a receptacle. The third way to do it is you can put the wire on the side of the receptacle. Now, the thing to keep in mind when you're doing the side wiring method is you want to wrap the wire around the screw in a clockwise fashion. The reason I say you want to do a clockwise fashion is because that is the direction that you tighten anything with when it comes to screws. Well, unless it has a reversed thread. Anyway, you're going to tighten it clockwise. And as it tightens, typically what it'll do is it'll pull the wire down and into the screw and make it nice and tight and snug. If you try to wrap the wire in a counterclockwise fashion, what you'll end up finding out is that as you go to tighten the screw, it'll try and push the wire out and away from the screw. Now, this is not the way that I generally prefer to wire receptacles, but it is a very common way that you will see people doing them. So if you're going to use that method, make sure that you wrap it clockwise. Number 4 is one that I think most people have never even heard of. And if you look at a receptacle, all receptacles have these little tabs that are on the ends of the receptacle. Tabs, ears is what a lot of people call them as well. Those tabs, or ears if you like, are actually removable, and what they're used as is washers. If you've ever been in a house when you're wiring up the receptacles and you go to screw it into the wall and sometimes it goes in just a little bit too far and you wish you could just pull it out just a tad, well, a lot of people, they think those ears are actually to keep the receptacle from sucking in all the way, and they actually are. But sometimes the drywallers cut the drywall too far away from the receptacles box, and you can't use the ears to hold it out. Well, you can break those tabs off, put it behind the screw, and now you have some washers that you can use as spacers for your receptacle in your wall. Number 5, and I honestly think this one's actually very common, but I'm going to cover it anyway, is when you're looking at the front of a receptacle, some of them are flat and some of them are indented. Quite simply, all that indentation is when you buy them that way is to help the plug find its way into the hole a lot easier, as opposed to having to make sure you have it perfectly lined up when inserting. Number 6, on the side of every single receptacle is a little tab that's in between the screws. The reasoning behind that is because now you can take and remove that little tab. You now have a receptacle that you can use and have 2 different power sources from it. Or you can have a switched receptacle. That way, say the bottom or the top, whichever you prefer, is a switchable receptacle. Now, switched receptacles are not very common in houses today, but they were very common in the 50s because anytime you had a house built, what they would do, instead of putting light fixtures on your ceilings, they would just put switched receptacles in your walls. And that is quite simply how they were able to accomplish that. And now, because we're talking about switched receptacles, I'm going to jump to another topic that a lot of people argue about. So now we're going to go on to number 7. And with number 7, we're going to discuss whether the receptacles should be mounted with the ground up or with the ground down. And that is a big argument with a lot of different people in the trades community. Quite frankly, in the code book, there is no specific method that you have to use when putting the receptacle on the wall, whether it be ground up or ground down. It's kind of a personal preference. But like I was just talking about having a switched receptacle in your wall, typically what you will find, or at least this is what I do anyway, if you have a switched receptacle, I will mount that receptacle on the wall upside down or with the ground up. And the reason that I do it that way is because then it's easy for you to look in a room and know if you have a switched receptacle in the wall. Number 8, all receptacles actually have that funny little screw on the side of them, where it's a flathead Phillips combination screw. But on the cheap ones, that is all you can really use, is the flathead Phillips. But if you buy the higher quality receptacles like I do, there is a third tool you can use to tighten up your screws. And to me, it's the only tool to use when I'm doing my wiring. And what that little tool is an SQ1. It's a square head, and it gives you a lot more torque when tightening your screws, so you're guaranteed to have a much better connection. Number 9, it's basically, you can get any receptacle in either a duplex face or a Decora face. Now, when I say duplex face, you can actually still get that in a single or a triplex as well. Typically, a triplex is going to have a Decora face. But the thing that I want to point out is Decora is quite simply a brand name. It's not the actual type of receptacle that you're going to be buying. You're buying what they refer to as the square face receptacle. Number 10. To me, this is a big one that I don't think actually anybody really knows about at all. And that is, again, quite simply, with a lot of your higher brand receptacles, and even on some of the cheap ones for that matter, the tabs that are on the top, or the ears that are on the top of the receptacle, those are actually designed to be used as wire strippers. I'm going to try and demonstrate it here for you really quickly. And looking at either end of this receptacle, you'll notice that one set of the ears at the top of the receptacle, or the bottom, is larger than the other. And the reason that is, these can be used as strippers. Now, the one end is for a number 12 gauge wire, and the other end is quite simply for a 14 gauge wire. And how you do that is you quite simply slide the wire up and into the little slot that's there, spin it around just a little bit and give it a little bit of a pull, and right there you have it. You have a really handy wire stripper. Now, I am going to say that it is a bit of a pain, and I would prefer to use my Greenlee or Klein wire strippers any day of the week over trying to use the tabs that are on the top of a receptacle. But they are there for your convenience. And if you are someone that's out, like me, for example, I do maintenance work, and sometimes you don't grab all your tools just by mistake. And that is a nice way that you can quickly strip a wire, and you don't even need a tool to do it. Anyway, I hope this video was informative and enjoyable. And if you'd like to learn more about receptacles or anything with wiring, how about you check out this playlist here.